So now I would like to bring up John and Olivia Carpenter. John and Olivia are a father-daughter team, and I do mean team because they together rode a bike across the country to bring attention to, celebrate, and raise money for the orcas. So, and John has a particular story and photographic evidence to show that he was there when it started, back in the 60s, I mean 70s probably about 70, 70 itself. Right, August 1970, Penn Cove capture. Anyway, he'll tell you more about that story with the photographic evidence. And Cindy and Susan are up here. And I'm not sure what about. Yeah, right. Now I'm shaking.
I just wanted to say a few words about Olivia because I met Olivia when she was how old were you? 9, 10? Yeah. She and her grandmother did a Rhodes Scholar program that I was involved with. So I had a chance to meet her when she was a little girl. And she was one of those kids that you could immediately see that love and passion for the orcas. And I knew immediately that she was going to go on to do big, wonderful things. So it's been great to reconnect with her, and she'll tell you all about these big, wonderful things that she did. But I just wanted to mention that this has been a passion with her for a long, long time. And I've been really blessed to be part of that. So welcome, Olivia.
Yeah. And we're trying not to make the introduction longer than the talk here, but these are very special guests, and you'll hear more about that. But they raised over $12,000 for us on to go to help the orcas, the southern residents in particular. And we know that they have a connection with Lolita, and so as a gift, we have a picture done by Lisa Bloom, who also has some nice things in the auction, and she's here somewhere. There she is right there, of Toki, a reunion of Toki and her mother, Ocean's son. So we wanted to just give us a small token of our thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you, Susan and Cindy. We're excited to be here today and share our experience with you. This is the first time actually we've had the opportunity to run through a presentation like this and tell everyone about our epic journey. So, any cyclists in the house? A bunch, good. Anybody ride here today? All right, there's a few. We thought about it, but good for you. The weather's not quite so great today, but we've got a few things to go through today. So we're going to tell you a bit about our inspiration, our fundraising, the planning for this epic ride, our support. We've got a bunch of photos from the ride, and then some diversions and curiosities. So our inspiration for the ride, Howard mentioned this picture here in the lower left. That's me and my sister, who's actually here today as well, and my mother's here. She took that picture on the ferry from, we were on the ferry from Clinton to Mukilteo in August of 1970, and I still remember that vividly. I was only 5, but here was this orca on the back of this flatbed truck, and they were pouring water on it. It was clearly distressed. I could hear it breathing. I could look into its eyes, and it stuck with me. I still vividly remember that, and it's ironic that we come full circle now that my daughter Olivia is such an avid orca lover, and that we were able to do this ride to save the orcas. This is my father, and he was a huge inspiration to me. He rode his bicycle across Europe several times. He and I rode from Munich to Vienna one time together, and so I've always sort of had the touring mentality in my blood. And this is Good morning, North Dakota. It's this kind of scene that inspired me. I'm a daily bike commuter, and this is obviously a very different scene, and so I was thinking about that on 4th of July, a year before we went, and we were sitting in the backyard, and I said, "Hey, Olivia, I was thinking."
Yeah, what were you thinking? I said, yeah, what were you thinking?
You know, I was thinking we should ride our tandem bike across the country.
Well, how long is that?
Well, my iPhone says your Aunt Sarah in Boston is 2,600 miles away.
How long would that even take?
Well, that would probably take us the entire summer.
Well, where would we stay at night?
I don't know, we'd camp, maybe we'd get an RV, stay in hotels, we'll figure it out. I'm sure your mom would drive the sag wagon.
How hard do you think it would be?
Oh, how hard could it be? We've done a lot of riding, right?
Well, okay, I'm in.
Really?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So after I signed up for this ride, we realized that because this is such a big adventure, that we should raise money for an organization. And I've always been passionate about orcas. Like Cindy said, my grandma took me to this camp on San Juan Island called Whales and Trails. And we learned about whales, we learned about the orcas, we even got a chance to see them. And since then, I've always been in love with them. And so we decided to raise money for the Orca Network, also because they have such a good program, they're doing so many great things to help the whales. So our initial goal was to raise $10,000, and we actually achieved this goal on July 21st, about a month into our trip. But a total of over 125 people contributed, and we raised over $13,000 for the Orca Network in total.
So planning and logistics, as you can imagine, the country is large and it took a lot of time to figure this out. Fortunately, the Adventure Cycling Association has these route guides for different routes. So we followed the northern tier, and that basically took us through Washington, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, into Canada, Ontario, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and then finally down to Boston in Massachusetts.
Wow.
So after we did a few training rides, we had our old bike. It was actually called Green Lizzie, but we realized it was kind of small because I kept growing.
Amazingly.
So we decided to order a new bike. It was really cool. We got to kind of design it. We made the colors blue to represent the ocean. And we decided to name it Double Stuff. I've been a long time adopter of Cookie, J38, and Double Stuff, J34, was his brother, but he passed away last year. So we decided to honor him by naming our bike after him. Also because it was a tandem bike, double the fun.
So being a techie, we outfitted the bike with lots of speed equipment. There's a shot of our iPhone screenshot with our mapping. We had a solar panel to keep our iPhones charged. We had a generator hub in the front wheel to keep our lights going. And so we did a lot of training rides throughout the spring, and many of you probably recognize Kenmore Air's Orca plane here. Kenmore Air is a big supporter of the orcas, so we took that opportunity to snap that photo. It involved lots of time in the bike shop getting fit for this, because one thing we couldn't do is develop a knee or shoulder pain. There's a picture of our bike shop up there, Counterbalance near U Village in Seattle.
It was always a requirement for me on the training rides to stop at Starbucks and get a treat.
Treats go a long way. So we had to figure out where we were gonna sleep at night. We ultimately decided to buy a used RV, which turned out to be great. That's a picture of my wife Emily, who's also here today in the upper left, and her sister. We could not have done it without her. She did everything for us. She did the laundry, she did the She did the driving, she did the provisioning, she made the meals, and she was amazed by how much food we actually ate.
And we transferred our license plate from our car onto the rig that says Save JKL. So across the country, we would use that. People would be like, what's Save Juckle? We'd be like, oh, it's Save JKL, the resident orca pods of the San Juan Islands. So we used that to raise awareness. I also made a brochure that we passed out along the way to raise awareness and let people know what we were doing.
So we had lots of friends and family support too. My daughter, Rebecca, older daughter, is up there in the left. She joined us for several weeks and helped cook and clean, and that's Olivia's grandfather. Olivia's grandmother was able to join us as well, and lots of friends and family along the way. So we kicked off the ride on June 24th, and I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was hot. It was in the 90s. It was 93 that day. We were sent off by lots of friends and family. We dipped the rear wheel, which is the traditional thing to do. We dipped it there in the Pacific, and started out on our first day, our 37-mile ride.
37 miles really did become known as a really short day. The first day was actually our shortest day of the whole trip. Dad had told me that the average mileage per day was going to be 63 miles, but we had a lot of 75 to 80 mile days, so it certainly seemed like a lot more than that.
But she was a great stoker. She kept pedaling the whole way. And as I said, we went through 11 states and 2 countries. And so what was the daily routine like? Well, there was plenty of bike maintenance, as you can imagine. Lubing the chain, checking the tires. There was always some adjustment. Started with coffee in the morning, looking at the route. Emily was always figuring out where we were gonna spend the night and plug in, hopefully, so we could get the air conditioner going. But then we would download the route into the iPhone so we'd have it throughout the day. And then when it was about an hour before time to leave, it was time to wake up the stoker.
This was probably one of the hardest parts of the day for me, just getting out of bed.
But we fueled up, had our first breakfast, and then we rode 30 or 40 miles, stopped for our second breakfast.
We had decided when we started the trip that we wanted to try out different kinds of ice cream as we rode across to see which state had the best ice cream. But we actually didn't stop for ice cream that much. So instead, every morning we would have bacon, and we would try out all the different kinds of bacon. And I personally thought that the best bacon was there on the left in North Dakota at the Hitchin Post Cafe.
Great bacon.
And when we couldn't find bacon, we had donuts.
Could eat anything I wanted.
This was an average day's worth of our consumption. We were lucky enough to have Cliff Bar sponsor us, so they would send us boxes of this stuff. So we would just snack on it all day long.
I don't think we ever want to eat any of that stuff again. There's Olivia grabbing a snack. We did get ice cream.
So for the first 2 weeks of our trip, we were basically training for going over Glacier National Park, the Continental Divide. So it was a total of about 4,400 vertical feet up.
Seemed like
Yeah, it was really hard. We had to be off the road by 11, or else there became too many tour buses. So we started in the morning, and then we made it to the top.
Here's just one of the screenshots. So we had daily stats from our Ride with GPS program, but you can see the 4,400 feet. We had a maximum grade of 13%. You can see our max speed down the lower right, 41. That was going down the other side, trust me, on the way. So we started early that day, rode into the park. I think that was one of the earliest days, by 6 a.m. It was cool. Stopped by Lake McDonald on the way. Then we started climbing. Seems like we froze here. Yeah, waiting for there we go. So climbed and climbed and climbed.
It was really cool climbing because like after each turn we found like a new beautiful scene, and there were like beautiful flowers by the side, and it was like one of the prettiest parts of the trip. Here's some more examples. Something that was really cool when we got to the top, we saw mountain goats, and it was really funny. One of them actually climbed up on the roof. There's a picture of him right there. The park rangers said like he just like did that often, and he would just climb up there and like hang out for a little bit.
There he is. So then we zoomed down the other side, and we were on the other side of the Rockies. We went to the famous Johnson's Lodge and ate chicken fried steak and good soup, they called it, which really was good. So then the next morning, we headed out. We've got the Rocky Mountains in the rear view mirror, and we thought we'd seen the last of the hills, so we thought this picture was kind of funny.
Although that was honestly a lie. I had been told by many people that after we crossed the Rocky Mountains, it would be flat and like supposedly easy. However, there was actually so many hills, just like up and down, that it was actually a lot harder than expected.
So we dropped down into Browning, where the Blackfeet Nation is, and they were having a festival. Kept on going to Cut Bank. There's an early morning sunrise. We did a lot of interviews along the way. This is a post in Havre, North Dakota, where we were interviewed and put online. We did about a dozen interviews. A lot of times they were just teeny little towns that weren't even online, but they put a story in their print edition.
How you doing back there, Olivia?
I'm already tired.
Nothing like a good lightning storm to keep us motivated. Keep the speed up. Great way to spend my birthday, though. Cycling with my daughter.
This was actually our longest day, 107 miles with a tailwind. So we were basically following Highway 2, known as the High Line, to the local Montanas across. And one of the cool things about being on the High Line was also the train tracks, so we kind of referred to them as our friends. They kind of kept us motivated. A lot of times they were going the same direction that we were, and they were our friends unless they were a coal train or an oil train, which
We would
was...
try to get them to honk their horns at us, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And this one, it did though.
And unfortunately, there were some oil derricks, but we were well south of the shale areas. So then we made our way to Fargo, which is actually a great town. We were there for a rest day and went to the market. We had shown Olivia the movie Fargo the night before, so Emily and I thought it was quite funny to get that wood chipper beer. I'm not sure if you guys have seen that movie. So from there, we went into Minnesota. We got onto the Centennial Lakes Trail and the Wobegon Trail, and then on into, oh, you were gonna say something there.
Yeah, well, on these trails, and once we were in the Midwest, it was super humid, and Dad would always complain that I was on the back of the bike wiggling, but most of the time, it was because there were these biting flies that were drafting behind us, so I would be turning around and trying to swat them away from us, trying to protect our backs from getting bitten.
So this is some much needed rest at Lake Place in Wisconsin. And then from there we headed out, and this was our one rain day of the entire summer that we rode in the rain.
It was really cold, and for like the rest of the trip, it was like super hot. So this actually it was like quite a shock for us, and we weren't really prepared for it. So it was just super cold.
So from there, we continued across Wisconsin to the shores of Lake Michigan and got on the last coal-fired steamship, the SS Badger, and took it from Manitowoc to Ludington across Lake Michigan. And then continued across the Michigan Panhandle on a lot of rails to trails. And that's the historic Hops and Donuts, if you guys have ever heard of that place. From there, we got onto a ferry and crossed into Ontario in Canada, and then continued to ride across the northern shore of Lake Erie, where we were happy to see there were lots of wind farms, one of the largest wind farms in Canada. So that was really cool to check out. And warm water, you went swimming.
Yeah, it was really fun to go swimming. There were really fun waves, so it was a nice break.
And it was at this point that we actually ran into two other cyclists riding cross country. Amazingly, a mother my age and her son, Olivia's age. And I think Olivia was actually shocked to see that someone else was as crazy as we were. But that was a lot of fun, so we rode with them for several days. And then on to Niagara Falls for another rest day. Rebecca joined us again. From there, we crossed back into the U.S. from New York and cycled along the Erie Canal for most of New York. And that was interesting and fun on a lot of different paths. From there, into Vermont, New Hampshire. Felt like we were back with our people and all the Subarus.
So there were a lot of like dangers and annoyances. The middle picture there, we had been told that the next town that we were going to ride through was swarmed with mosquitoes. So we came ready. We were like, we had a bunch of clothes on, and there's my mom like spraying us with DEET bug spray. Fortunately though, like for some reason when we passed through, all the mosquitoes were gone. So we just got really lucky. A lot of times, well not a lot of times, but like a fair amount of times, the roads were actually closed, but sometimes it offered a nice break. Like here, this was in Eastern Washington. The road was closed, so we stopped at an orchard and had a nice break in the shade with some cherries. Another thing that was really hard on this trip was sometimes we had a headwind, and at one point we actually drafted behind the rig, and it saved us a lot of time and effort because the headwind really like restrained our movement. Also, there was a lot of ragweed, which my dad is like really allergic to, so that bothered him a lot, and also the heat was insane. And we had a bunch of different kinds of roads, like some were better than others, like the rumble strip was a real issue. And road closures that we actually had to have a big detour for.
And bike maintenance. Amazingly, we actually only had 2 flats the entire time. It turned out the second one was because we hadn't gotten the rock completely out of the tire. We had a couple blowouts, that was not fun. And then here's Olivia getting a lesson in bike maintenance, cleaning, replacing the brakes and the belt drive and a whole bunch of things here. And again, sometimes the bike route just ended. And sometimes we were trying to save time and skirt a main highway. As you can see the one on the right there where we're having to pass over some rocks.
So some fun facts, we had a total of 3,523 miles, which 9 weeks on the road, 68 miles average per day, but it seemed like a lot longer. Our shortest day, like I mentioned earlier, was day 1, 37 miles. Longest day, 107 miles on Dad's birthday. 1 day of rain, 2 blowouts, 2 flats. Dad swallowed 2 bugs. We would be riding along and all of a sudden start choking. I'd be like, oh my God, what's wrong? 1 bee sting, and 9 mean dogs encounters. Yeah, we both carried pepper spray. Fortunately, we never had to use it, although there was one time where this dog was literally about to bite our legs off, and I probably would have sprayed the pepper spray, except the wind would have brought it right into Dad.
So diversions and curiosities. We, as you can imagine, saw a lot of interesting things.
One of my favorite parts was the Theodore Roosevelt National Park. We saw wild buffalo and wild horses, and there was elk and like ground squirrels, so that was really cool. Also, we found some random friendly cats, which was fun. And one time we were riding along and there was a turtle just in the middle of the road. And so I screamed at my dad, I was like, stop, stop, we have to save the turtle. So we stopped the bike and I ran and I grabbed the turtle from the road before the cars came. And then we were able to like safely put it in a marsh. Also on our training rides before we left, I made a deal with Dad that during our ride, if I ever wanted to stop to pet the horses, that he would have to let me. So we stopped to pet the horses a lot. It was a nice break.
We made a lot of friends.
It was fun.
And as you can imagine, there are lots of random things that you see as you ride across the country.
Such as the world's largest purple spoon, but maybe. Other fun stuff right there.
All right, finally, so day 63, Olivia's birthday, August 25th. We made it to Boston. We rode through Boston. We went through the Boston Commons and saw the ducklings. And from there, we rode to the harbor front and we got on a ferry and went across Boston Harbor to Hingham because we still actually had about 20 miles to go south to Green Harbor, where her grandparents' place is, where we were going to do the wheel dip. So our family had arranged with the local fire department there to actually escort us the last 5 miles through town. And so we got a grand entrance there.
It was very exciting and fun.
And exhilarating to be finished, I think. And there's the odometer, the final 3,523 miles. So we walked our bike out toward the beach and there were lots of people following us and dipped that wheel. Called it good. And then we went back and we celebrated Olivia's 15th birthday.
There we have it.
So I just really like to once again thank my wife Emily for all of her support. We could not have done it without her. She was
Probably
rig
would've
driver, chef, moral support, and my mother and my sister. And most of all, I'm proud of my daughter Olivia for persevering was the word of the day, because it was hard. It was much harder than we realized, but she did it, and I'm really proud of you, honey. We did a great thing. Any questions for the star?
Yeah, hi. Olivia, I'd just love to know if there was even a 5-second period where you're allowed to sit in the front seat.
He wants to know, was there a 5-second period she was allowed to sit in the front seat?
Actually, yeah, there was. Dad got tired of my wiggling again, so he got off the bike and made us switch, and we tried to ride, but unfortunately I wasn't tall enough to sit in the front seat, so we just kind of like fell over. But we tried.
Yeah, so the question's about the fundraising. Do you want to talk about that? Well, yeah, so we set up a website, RideForTheOrcas.com. It's still live. You can still go there and contribute. And we had a huge social media campaign on Twitter, Facebook, lots of friends and family, and then what we did is we plugged in Crowdwise. And so it's basically just a plug into the website, and so people could go there. And so there was a lot of word of mouth through my employer and friends and family, and so people would go there and then just sign up online, and then they take a cut, of course, but then they pass it on. And as we rode along and people talked to us, and they noticed, you know, all the stickers on the rig, and Olivia would hand out brochures, and people would just go and randomly donate.
So what's your next adventure?
What's our next adventure?
I don't know. Well, funny story. Now whenever Dad says, "So I was thinking," we all just go, "Uh-oh." I'm not sure exactly what our next adventure is. I definitely want to do like volunteering and like internships in the summer to help the whales some more.
Yep, and we're keeping double stuff. The rig is for sale if you want to buy it, but we're keeping the bike. Oh yeah.
If you did it again, would you still go tandem, or maybe this is more for Olivia in the backseat? The benefits of a tandem versus having a little better view on your own bike.
Would we still do a tandem if we did it again? I don't know. Would you, Olivia?
I don't know. I mean, it was kind of hard being stuck to him for 2 months, to be honest.
Staring at my butt.
But I think that if we were on separate bikes, I honestly probably wouldn't be able to keep up with him. And I told my grandpa this story, and he like labeled it the Stoker's Wrath. One time, Dad went off course because he thought it was a shortcut, but I had already looked ahead on the map, and I knew that like it was a dead end, like it wasn't a shortcut, and then we got to the dead end and we had to turn around. So then I would just like stop pushing, so Dad had to do all the work.
I'd actually enjoy being on the back and watching movies and hanging out. Someone else did the navigation. All right, well, thank you.
Family to stand up too.
Oh, yeah.
I followed you all through on the website.